There are moments in history that do not come with fireworks or grand speeches. They come quietly, almost unnoticed at first, and yet they end up changing the way millions of people feel about a family, a nation, and even about human nature itself. This is one of those moments. It happened outside the walls of an ancient castle, among a sea of flowers left by strangers, and it involved two brothers who had not stood side by side in public for more than 2 years. What the world witnessed that day was not planned as a spectacle. It was something far more human, a small, deliberate act of unity that spoke louder than any statement ever could. This is the story of that quiet gesture and why it still matters today. To understand why this moment touched so many hearts, it helps to remember what came before it. For years, the public had watched two brothers, once inseparable, once nicknamed part of a joyful young foursome alongside their wives, slowly drift apart. The warmth that once defined their relationship had faded into something colder, marked by distance, rumors, and reports of deep disagreements. By the time the family's matriarch, Queen Elizabeth II, passed away in September 2022, many wondered whether the rift between her grandsons had grown too wide to bridge, even for a moment as solemn as this. The Queen's death at the age of 96 sent a wave of grief across the United Kingdom and the wider world. People gathered outside royal residences across the country, and for most members of the royal family, it was the first time they appeared in public since her passing. Windsor Castle, the Queen's beloved home, became a gathering point for ordinary citizens who wanted to pay their respects. Over just a few days, the gates of the castle disappeared beneath an ocean of flowers, cards, candles, and handwritten notes. Children left drawings. Elderly visitors left single stems. Tourists who had never met the Queen stood quietly, wiping away tears. It was a scene of collective mourning unlike anything seen in decades. CBS News. Then, on a Saturday afternoon, something happened that nobody in the crowd expected. Prince William and Kate, the newly titled Prince and Princess of Wales, were joined by Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, for a walkabout at Windsor Castle. It was their first engagement under their new titles, following the accession of King Charles III. But the significance of the moment went far beyond titles. It was the first time the two couples had appeared together in public since a Commonwealth Day service more than 2 years earlier. Since that day in March 2020, the world had watched the brothers grow further apart, their wives caught in headlines about tension, jealousy, and family disputes that seemed impossible to resolve. And yet there they were. 4 figures dressed entirely in black, walking together along the long walk toward the castle gates, preparing to look at the flowers left in tribute to the woman who had shaped all of their lives. According to people close to the family, the invitation for this reunion came directly from William himself, who asked his brother and sister-in-law to join him and Kate in viewing the tributes. This detail matters enormously. It was not an accident of scheduling. It was not arranged by aides trying to manufacture a photo opportunity. It was a deliberate choice made by a man who, whatever his private feelings, understood that this was a moment bigger than personal history. A later account from a royal biographer would go even further, revealing that William had insisted on the walkabout with Harry and Meghan, even though it was described as an emotionally difficult and uncomfortable decision behind the scenes, given the years of reported distance between the two households. Imagine, for a moment, the weight William must have been carrying that day. He had just lost his grandmother, a woman who had been a steady presence throughout his entire life. He was stepping into a new role as heir to the throne with all its unfamiliar pressures. His father had just become king. And on top of all of that, he chose, on one of the hardest days of his life, to set aside personal tension and stand publicly beside a brother he had barely spoken to in years. That is not a small thing. That is the definition of quiet strength. When the 4 royals arrived at the gates near Cambridge Gate on the castle's famous Long Walk, the crowd could hardly believe what they were seeing. The two couples, all dressed in mourning black, walked together to inspect the growing banks of flowers that well-wishers had left at the gates since the Queen's death 2 days earlier. For a family once nicknamed the Fab Four during happier years, and whose public split had made headlines around the globe, this reunion carried a symbolism that went far beyond royal protocol. What followed was not a staged photo call. It was something much more ordinary, and because of that, much more powerful. Members of the public handed flowers to both couples, and Harry and Meghan accepted bunches offered by the crowd, just as William and Kate did on their side. Someone in the crowd waved a Welsh flag in the background, a small nod to William and Kate's title as Prince and Princess of Wales. At one point, a child in the crowd handed William a small Paddington bear, a gentle, almost playful echo of the beloved sketch the Queen herself had filmed with the character just months before her death, in which she revealed she kept a marmalade sandwich in her handbag for later. William, visibly moved, passed the small toy on to an aide, careful with it, as though he understood exactly what it represented. Perhaps the most touching detail of the entire afternoon was something small enough that many people almost missed it. At one moment, William was seen gently touching Kate's back as she crouched down again to speak with a child waiting at the front of the barriers. It was not a gesture meant for cameras. It was the kind of small, protective touch a husband gives his wife without even thinking about it. A silent form of support in the middle of an exhausting, emotionally heavy day. It became, for many who watched the footage afterward, one of the most talked-about details of the entire event. In a day full of history and headlines, it was this tiny human moment that people kept coming back to. Rather than walking as one single group, the two couples moved along the barriers separately, with William and Kate greeting people on one side of the road, while Harry and Meghan spoke with the public on the other side. Some observers read this as evidence that old tensions had not fully disappeared. Others saw it differently, as a practical way for two very large crowds to be greeted more efficiently, allowing more people the chance to have a personal moment with the royals they had waited hours to see. Either interpretation captures something true about the day. This was not a fairy tale reconciliation. It was something more realistic, more human, and in many ways more meaningful. Two brothers choosing, despite everything unresolved between them, to show up together for something bigger than their disagreements. For the thousands of people gathered outside Windsor Castle that day, the reunion offered an unexpected kind of comfort. Grief has a way of making people crave togetherness, of making small divisions feel unimportant compared to shared loss. Watching William and Harry stand within the same short stretch of road, both accepting flowers from strangers, both nodding quietly at kind words offered by grieving members of the public, gave many onlookers a sense that even a family often described as fractured could still come together when it truly mattered. News of the walkabout spread almost instantly around the world. Television networks across different continents broke into their coverage to show the footage. It also marked the first time William appeared before the public in his new role as Prince of Wales following his father's accession to the throne. Commentators noted that the sight of the two couples walking the same stretch of pavement, even separately, carried an emotional resonance that no formal statement from the palace could have matched. Many described it as William and Kate extending something like an olive branch to Harry and Meghan, inviting them to take part in this public tribute rather than keeping the moment to themselves. Fox News. It is worth pausing here to consider why this particular gesture struck such a deep chord with people who had never met any of these four individuals and never would. Part of the answer lies in how universally relatable the situation was, even within the extraordinary setting of a royal family. Almost everyone, at some point in their life, has experienced a rift with a sibling, a friend, or a family member. Almost everyone knows the particular ache of watching a relationship that was once close slowly grow distant. And almost everyone understands, on some instinctive level, how difficult it can be to set pride and hurt aside and simply show up for someone during a moment of shared loss. William did not need to invite his brother that day. Nobody would have blamed him for keeping the appearance limited to himself and Kate. The reported tension between the brothers was, by that point, widely known and well documented. Choosing to include Harry and Meghan meant risking awkwardness, risking uncomfortable questions from the press, risking a moment that could easily have gone wrong in front of the entire world's cameras. And yet he did it anyway because on that day, grief mattered more than grievance. That, in the end, is the real meaning behind the gesture. It was not about erasing years of reported difficulty between two brothers. It was not a fairy tale ending where everything was suddenly resolved. Life and families rarely work that way, royal or otherwise. Instead, it was about something quieter and, in some ways, more admirable. The decision to prioritize a shared moment of remembrance over private disagreements, even if only for one afternoon. For Kate, too, the day carried its own quiet significance. She had spent years navigating her role within a family under constant public scrutiny, often serving as a steady, composed presence during difficult moments. Her interactions with the crowd that day, crouching down to speak with children, accepting bouquets with warm words of thanks, reflected the same calm grace she had shown throughout her public life. The small gesture of William's hand on her back was, in many ways, a reflection of their partnership, two people supporting each other through one of the most emotionally demanding weeks of their lives, while still finding the strength to comfort thousands of grieving strangers. Meghan and Harry, for their part, appeared visibly touched by the reception they received. Members of the crowd could be heard calling out warmly to Harry as he and Meghan made their way along the barriers, greeting well-wishers who had waited for hours in the hope of catching a glimpse of the family during such a historic week. For a couple who had stepped back from royal duties and relocated across the ocean, returning to stand at the gates of Windsor, among flowers left for the grandmother Harry had so clearly loved, was its own quiet, emotional homecoming. In the days that followed, the walkabout became one of the most discussed royal moments of the entire mourning period. It was replayed on news broadcasts, dissected by commentators, and shared endlessly across social media. People who had never paid much attention to royal affairs found themselves moved by a handful of short video clips. Two couples in black, a child's Paddington bear, a husband's hand resting gently on his wife's back, four people choosing unity over distance during the hardest week of their family's recent history. What made the moment so powerful in the end was its simplicity. There were no rehearsed lines, no dramatic declarations, no attempt to explain away years of reported tension. There was only a shared walk, a shared grief, and a shared decision to stand together in front of the world, even while so much remained unresolved behind closed doors. It was a reminder that healing does not always arrive all at once, and that sometimes the most meaningful gestures are the smallest ones. A hand on a back, a bouquet accepted with a nod, a brother's invitation extended despite the awkwardness it might bring. Weeks later, as the period of national mourning came to a close, and the family returned to their separate lives and separate continents, the memory of that walkabout remained. It did not erase the complicated history between William and Harry, nor did anyone expect it to. But it offered something valuable all the same, proof that even amid deep and public disagreements, there can still be moments of grace, moments when family, however complicated, chooses to stand together rather than apart. And perhaps that is why this quiet gesture continues to resonate with people around the world, long after the flowers outside Windsor Castle were cleared away. It was never about grand statements or perfect resolutions. It was about two brothers, two wives, and one shared, unspoken understanding that some moments are simply too important to face alone.